G'day everyone, this is B. Jermaine, aka The Terrible Aussie, and before we get to the latest episode of the podcast, we here at the Super Network would like to send a very special thank you to Derek Smith for being our latest subscriber on Patreon. Thank you so much for both the friendship and support, Derek. It really means the world to both Marcy and I, and we deeply appreciate it, mate. Thank you so much. And now, on to the show.
The following podcast is a Super Network production with your hosts, Super Marcy.
Yeah, definitely a step up, but that could be perhaps maybe this script just worked. Maybe it was just the fact that it had Eric Roberts being all Eric Robertsy.
The terrible Australian B. Jermaine.
Why doesn't the vampire just leave? It's not like that he's being held there against his will. And we've seen him a few times on top of built-on roofs. Like, why doesn't he just piss off and leave?
It contains coarse and explicit language.
The housemate dude, I was like, why the f*** are you dressed like Constantine? That was just weird out the whole time.
Mature themes.
You know, it's your wedding day and everyone always has cold feet and they sort of... This is kind of more of the extreme version of that kind of scenario. Like, should I marry a serial killer or not?
And potential spoilers.
Spoiler alert.
For more, please visit supermarcy.com and show your support at patreon.com/thesupernetwork. Enjoy the show.
G'day everyone, this is Bede Jermaine, aka The Terrible Aussie, and welcome back to episode 22 of Podcasters the Horror, the podcast where we discuss film and TV horror anthologies. And with me as always is my lovely co-host, the one, the only, Super Marcy. Hello Marcy, how are you?
Hello. Doing very well, thank you, Bede. And how are you as we prepare to dive into two very cool horror anthology movies?
I'm pretty good, thanks. At the time of this recording, I'm currently just starting Junesploitation, as we all are on this show. I'm already I would say about only 1.5 movies in, because I haven't had a chance to finish my day 2 film, which was the Western one. So I'm about halfway through it, but I'm going to finish that today and then watch my next 2, mainly because I got family visiting at the moment, so I'm a little bit behind. But other than that, though, things have been good on my end, Marcy.
Yeah, Junesploitation is well underway as we are recording. I've seen some very strange films and looking forward to the rest of the month of even more weirdness and hopefully some really awesome new discoveries.
Indeed. And but Marcy, on tonight's show, we have a very special guest joining us.
Ooh, I'm excited.
Indeed, and she is a first-time guest who has never appeared on any of our shows, so she's making her debut appearance here on Podcasters of Horror, and she, of course, is a writer and blogger and one of the co-hosts of the awesome podcast, The Screamcast, and that, of course, is Stephanie Crawford. Hello, Stephanie, how are you?
Hello, I'm doing great. It's really cool to be here.
Indeed. Well, we're very happy for you to be here, and also and seeing if you can handle the awesomeness between me and Marcy.
I'm already feeling a little underwhelmed, but
Indeed. It's really just the Aussie accents that really kind of put everyone at standoffish at first.
I'm trying not to swoon. I'm going to try to be as professional as possible, but I can't actually make any promises.
That's okay. We'll forgive you for swooning over our lovely accents.
Although if you have any urge to actually just do an Aussie accent at any point during the show, feel free to, because we love hearing other people's Aussie accents on the show.
I think that would cause an international incident, and I do my best, but it would still be offensive, so no. Yeah.
That's all right, though, but we're glad that you're here, and it makes sense, though, because we have quite the packed show for Podcasters of Horror. Now, as we kind of stated in our previous episode, which was on the first season of the TV show Channel Zero, that sort of every bi-monthly we're going to be doing different episodes. So every 2 months we'll do an episode on a season from Channel Zero, but in between we're going to be doing an episode that tackles not 1 but 2 anthology horror films. And what's interesting, though, is how we pair these films is we pick a very sort of an older horror anthology film and we sort of pair it with a more recent one. So we got 2 pretty big ones tonight. One I would say is definitely up there as one of the granddaddies of the horror anthology subgenre, and as well one that I would consider one of the best recent examples from this subgenre. So tonight we're going to be talking about the films Tales from the Crypt and The Mortuary Collection.
Very excited.
Indeed. And we'll get straight to it, and we'll talk about our very first film tonight, which of course is the 1972 film Tales from the Crypt.
From the Crypt. Welcome to the Crypt. You are invited on a guided tour of a world of darkness, where nightmares become reality. If you dare. Teacher, how to... Death lives in Tales from the Crypt. Who's next? Perhaps you?
Which was directed by Freddie Francis, from a screenplay by Milton Subotsky, which is based on stories that were featured from the EC Comics Tales from the Crypt and Vault of Horror, and a few others as well. And this film stars Joan Collins, Peter Cushing, Roy Daltrey, Richard Green, Ian Hendry, Patrick Magee, Barbara Murray, Nigel Patrick, Robin Phillips, and Ralph Richardson as the Crypt Keeper. And of course, the plot summary for this film, which I'm reading off IMDb, is 5 strangers get lost in a crypt, and after meeting the mysterious Crypt Keeper, receive visions of how they die. Now, I think what a lot of people tend to forget is, like, even though we're all aware of the Tales from the Crypt TV show that came out in the late 80s, and that's probably when people hear the title Tales from the Crypt, that's their first immediate thought is of the TV show. But I think a lot of people tend to forget that Tales from the Crypt had been adapted before in film form in the early 70s by the British film company Amicus Films. And a lot of the stories came from those comics as well. So now, Stephanie, I know you're a huge fan of Tales from the Crypt. So tell us your thoughts on the 1972 film version of it.
Well, I would just right out of the gate recommend anyone who's a fan of the TV show to check it out. I think some people don't go rushing to films that are a little bit older, but this is wonderful. You don't have really a punny Crypt Keeper or anything like that, but the adaptations I think are wonderful. It's very moody, very spooky, just the right little dash of dry humor, very dark. I've revisited it about a handful of times. It's always fun, and there's always a couple details I didn't remember.
And Marcy, what are your initial thoughts on Tales from the Crypt?
Yeah, so this was my first time watching it. And yeah, like you said, I think I actually did not realize or remember that there was a film version of Tales from the Crypt from the early 70s, because I am fairly familiar with the TV shows. I've seen quite a number of episodes here and there over the years. So I was very keen to check it out and just see what it was like. And I was really, really impressed. I just didn't really know what was what it was, what was gonna happen. So yeah, the kind of wraparound on it was very mysterious and kind of you kind of get an idea of maybe what it could be, but then it kind of throws a big twist at you towards the end. But I found all the stories actually quite compelling, interesting, and very well acted. Yeah, some of them really took me by surprise, and I was getting very emotionally worked up with some of them, I have to say. Bede.
Well, actually, this was my first time watching the film. Like, I've been wanting to see this film for like forever, and for some bizarre reason, I didn't get to this one first, but I'd been watching a lot of other of Amicus Productions' other anthology horror films prior to this, like Asylum and The Vault of Horror. I'm surprised that I hadn't gotten to, Tales from the Crypt until now. And I gotta say, I agree with both of you. I think it's a really fun anthology horror film that has some pretty solid stories throughout. It also has a fantastic cast assembled for this film. But, Amicus always had this ability to, when it came to making their horror films, particularly their anthology ones, of just assembling just the most amazing cast of British actors in their films. And I think what's interesting, because I watched one of the special features on the Blu-ray for this one, is like the difference between Amicus and Hammer is that Hammer were, of course, more sort of interested in making horror films with a sort of a period Gothic setting. But what made Amicus different is that all their horror works were set in modern day. What I think is interesting about this film is that how, through its stories, it tackles so many different themes and topics that I, like you, Marcy and Steph, I just found really compelling. And we'll go through all of the stories very shortly and sort of judge them all individually as works on their own. So we'll start with the very first story and then do the wraparound last. The first story from Tales from the Crypt is All Through the House, which is adapted from issue 35 from The Vault of Horror. And in this one stars Joan Collins as a wife who, after killing her husband and trying to find ways to hide the body, there's a news report that goes out that a man in a Santa costume is on the run, and he may be at her house ready to kill her. So now, Steph, what did you think of this segment, All Through the House?
It's wonderful. Right. Well, I'm a huge Joan Collins fan, and she's very Joan Collins, and this very glamorous, very cold-blooded, because it's not just a killer Santa. It's a killer Santa versus a woman who just murdered her husband when her daughter is waiting upstairs to go to sleep because Christmas is the next morning. So you have to wonder at her timing a little bit. But it's wonderful. The setup is great, and it mostly plays silently. It's just building tension. You really need to depend on the actor conveying really how screwed she is. No, this one's really great, and it has that. Like Killer Santas have become very iconic, and it's not easy to stand out, but I think this one stands pretty tall within the subgenre.
And Marcy, what did you think of All Through the House?
Yeah, I'm with Steph. Like, Joan Collins is fantastic. I love her, and she's just like, in this, she looks absolutely stunning because it's Joan Collins. But she gives a really strong performance. And yeah, it is done with minimal dialogue during the segment. And I just got a question, like, her timing and preparation was terrible. Like, you should have lined some garbage bags for the blood or when you're killing your husband and everything. But you kind of like, I was almost thinking, like, why wouldn't she sort of be like, oh, I'll blame the murder of the husband on this escaped Santa dude. So it's a bit like, you kind of question some of the logic in it. But I think besides those little things that I'm like, oh, this is a bit silly, it's a really solid segment that you're sort of really not sure what's actually going to happen. And I liked it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this segment as well. I do love the setup that you have this Joan Collins' character, I honestly think that this character must have been written specifically for her because the character's name is Joanne Clayton, which sounds eerily similar to Joan Collins' name. But I do love the setup of this story because again, you got this woman who kills her husband, and then of course this sort of killer Santa Claus is stalking her, and you're kind of wondering like, how is this story going to go? Because your first instinct is, oh, there's this psychotic Santa Claus hanging around the house. I better call the cops. But she realizes she can't do that because if she does, the cops are going to get to the house and discover her husband's body. So I kept thinking, like, how are they going to approach the story? Because, could they, would she pin her husband's murder on the Santa Claus, or would something else happen? And throughout this whole little segment, it's just such a really entertaining one, and Joan Collins is great in it as well. And there is a lot of really well built tension throughout because the killer Santa Claus in the segment, who is played by Oliver McCreevy, he is very creepy whenever he's on screen, and of course having the daughter there adds that another layer of tension to it as well. And I know this story was adapted for the first season of the TV show itself, and is also one of the and I haven't seen the episode myself yet, but I do know it's probably one of the most standout episodes of the entire TV show. And I think there's a good reason for that, because it has that great hook to it, and the fact that it has a killer Santa Claus at the center of it, it sort of just grabs your attention very quickly once you hear that premise.
Definitely.
But I really enjoyed this segment, and I think it was a good way to kind of kick off this film as well.
For sure.
And
it definitely suckers you in, because then you start wondering, like, what's in store for all the other people who are in this like tomb.
Indeed,
with the monk or something. I don't know quite what it was meant to be.
Marcy, he is the crypt keeper. You show him some respect, damn it.
Well, he looked like a monk crypt keeper, but yes.
But we'll move right along to our second segment, which of course is Reflection of Death, which of course is adapted from issue 23 of Tales from the Crypt, which tells the story of a man played by Ian Hendry, who decides to leave his family one night and meet up with his mistress, and they go on a drive, and then they have a car accident, and then something bizarre happens to him after he survives the car crash. Now, this is actually the shortest segment out of all of them, but I'm very curious to hear what you both think. So, Stephanie, what did you think of this segment, Reflection of Death?
I think it's one of the weaker installments, but that doesn't mean it's bad. It really is just one of those neat little... It's almost really perfect for kids to kind of tell each other on the playground, like, oh, I saw a scary movie and this happened. It translates really well to kind of quickly explaining how spooky it is. And I do like how after that car accident, it switches to the first person point of view. That was very effective. And even though it telegraphed, you could kind of see where it was going when it switched to that. I thought it was very well done. So yeah, it's not my favorite or the most memorable, but still a lot of fun. It has a lot of effective moments.
And Marcy, what did you think of Reflection of Death?
Yeah, this I thought was I thought this was still a pretty solid segment, and you kind of when it does switch gears and it is in the first person, you sort of think maybe this is what's happening, but then it kind of takes it to a different level with what was actually going on. And I think it is kind of an interesting little story with this man leaving his family to go be with another woman, and they're gonna just he leaves and such, and you kind of get hints that this guy is gonna be he's taking off to leave, because when he goes to say goodbye to his children and I think it was his daughter, who says good night, but he says goodbye. So I think that was a big sort of hint. Okay, this guy is going to be doing something a bit sus, and it's kind of these are all very maybe in some of them a little bit sketchy with their sort of word, I don't know if it's a warning story, stories with messages, you kind of get what I'm trying to say very badly. So and then when it does, because there is this big car accident, and yeah, he survives. Mm-mm. It is a spoiler podcast, so um, yeah. So yeah, when it switches gears, like I found that really really interesting that they did that, and it does really work for the twists in that particular segment. And I felt, the performances were all fairly decent as well. So, and it's kind of a sad, little messed up one.
Yeah, I would agree. I think out of all the stories that are in this film, it's definitely I would say the weakest one, but it's still pretty effective regardless. And I think maybe if it was a little bit longer, it probably would have be a bit better. But I think given the type of story that it is, like it kind of makes sense why it would be a lot shorter than compared to the other stories. But I do like the fact that you get the setup with the husband leaving his family. Again, you're not sure why at first, and then of course he meets his mistress, and then the car accident happens. And I agree with you, Stephanie. I love when the film kind of switches gears from his point of view. That looked so way ahead of its time in terms of, like seeing point of view of a character, like from their point of view, like as they're sort of stumbling around trying to figure out what's going on, they're coming across other characters, they get frightened, and you're never exactly sure. And the main character isn't exactly sure what is going on. Like, why are these people running away from him? Then he goes meets his wife, and then she freaks out, and then you find out, oh, she's married to another man now, and you're like, what is going on? Like, when is all of this happening? And then once he goes back and meets his mistress, who is now blind, we discover it's been 2 years since the car accident, and he's been dead the entire time. And then, of course, he sees his reflection in the mirror and sees that he's now become a rotting corpse. But the twist is that he wakes up and it's a dream, but then the car accident still happens. And I love that episode. I mean, the segment kind of ends on that note because we don't know if it's going to be if that was just a warning, whether the car crash is going to happen, or is it kind of like a little time loop type of thing, or is this something that's going to keep happening to him over and over
Yeah.
again?
See, I felt that, like it could have been sort of like a premonition, Final Destination style, but then he still repeats the same mistakes. So I think there's definitely, like, it really wanted to have a few things to say. But yeah, I felt like the few, like the twists in it were very clever and unexpected, because you kind of think, or maybe this is like one of those, he's seeing what would happen if he goes to, leaves his wife or whatever, but then you find out, oh no, he's been dead and he's a rotting corpse. And then it twists it again. And it's sort of a way to make something simple, bit more complex, I think.
That is a great point from both of you. Like the ambiguity at the end, that'd be a great thing to argue with people, because you get some different point of views.
Oh, for sure.
Absolutely.
For sure. Yeah. We'll move right along to our next segment, which of course is Poetic Justice, which is taken from issue 12 from The Haunt of Fear. This segment stars Robin Phillips and David Markham as a father and son who are rich neighbors to an old man who lives across the street, who is played by the great and legendary Peter Cushing, and they think that he is a blight on their community because he's very well beloved by everyone. The kids love him, animals love him, and they feel like, you know what, he's bringing the whole neighborhood down. He needs to be get rid of. So they decided to organize a smear campaign against them. And like in all Tales from the Crypt fashion, it doesn't quite go well for them in the end. So Stephanie, tell us your thoughts on Poetic Justice.
Well, I thought about it when I first was talking about this film. I said, oh, it's fun, It is, because it's fun to see a bunch of jerks get their comeuppance. But there's also a lot of heartbreak in this movie. There's a lot of kind of disenfranchised people being treated terribly throughout. And that's Peter Cushing is definitely one of them. It's wonderful to see him in this role. He's just, he's not posh at all. He's just kind of, I'm trying to think of the British name. She's like a rubbish collector, and he's just so kind and simple. And these rich assholes are just, yeah, they're absolutely disgusting. They get rid of his dogs. They make terrible implications about him with the children, send horrific valentines to him that eventually lead him to committing suicide. And at this point, it's terrible, but throughout, he's just a sweet, simple man, but he keeps turning to like a spirit board, a stack of occult books, and you're like, all right, he's not completely powerless. He's still in touch with his beloved late wife. And yeah, it's one of those things where you suffer through seeing a really sweet character basically get tortured, because you know the ending will pay off. And it does, with rhyming. So yeah, this one I just love. Peter Cushing makes it easy to love. He goes all in. He's just incredible. He always gave 110%. Yeah, just the morality tales in this, they seem to keep ramping up.
Yeah, they absolutely do. And I think this one is it's a lot more on the nose, but it's executed like really well.
Oh, for sure. But tell us your thoughts on it, Marcy.
Yeah, look, to be honest, I did not recognize that was Peter Cushing at first as Grimsdyke. And according to Wikipedia, he's an elderly dustman.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
Yep.
Thank you.
There we go. And he's a very sympathetic character. He's obviously, a man who, had a close relationship to his wife who'd passed on, and definitely feels that, that missing of someone there. So he misses her presence around. He's got the dogs. He likes to, restore old toys and give them to the town children. And he seems very, kind and endearing, gives him something to do, gives him a purpose. And then these two rich dick faces, because let's be real, they are dick faces, like they could have giant dicks on their faces, are just so mean because of it's just an old house. And then they go from one thing like, okay, we're going to take the animals away. Now we're going to make sure you don't have a job. And then we're just going to tell the parents you are a pedophile when he's not. And then they don't know that, yeah, he's into the occult and he still has communications with his wife who kind of gives him a warning. And the kind of last straw is like, it's Valentine's Day and they just send the poor man all these horrible Valentine's cards saying they're from the town. Basically,
all
saying
in the same handwriting, though.
Yeah.
I would have been very suspicious.
Yes, I was about to say they're all written very, very similar. And you think that maybe this was the last straw and that Grimsdyke has committed suicide. But as we find out, I think he had a bit of a plan. And when we see the revenge on the younger, the son, Dickface number 2, he's had his heart ripped out with a really lovely Valentine's note. And you're like, you know what? Good for you. That guy fucking deserved it. But, the other thing he could have done, like, to the dickhead dad, dickhead number 1, dude, I would have, like, fucking ripped his head off and shoved it up his own ass. But this is 1972, and they're adapting a story, not written by me, so there we go.
See, this is why we should remake this story, Marcy, and so that stuff can happen.
Have even worse revenge. But yeah, no, this was a really, really... trying to think of the right word. It's a really, really strong segment, and it's really anchored perfectly by really good performances. Like Peter Cushing is fantastic, and can't think of the actors. I'm gonna have to look it up.
Robin Phillips and David Markham.
Yeah, they play dickhead number 1 and 2, dickface, whatever I'm calling them, fuckface McGee. They play such hateful characters to perfection. So it's really well done.
I really enjoyed this segment. I would actually say out of all the segments in this film, I think this is the best one. Like, it is very well written and very well acted by everyone. And like you, Marcy, like, even though I knew it was Peter Cushing in this film, it's such a polar opposite of all the types of performances we have seen from him throughout his whole career. This isn't him like playing Van Helsing or other kind of, his other performances in other Hammer horror films and stuff like that. This is such a completely different departure of a role. And I remember, I think I was reading trivia the other day that I think he was offered one of the other roles in this segment, but he read the script and was like, actually, I want to play Grimsdyke. That's actually a more interesting role to play. And I think he just knocks it out of the park. He is such a sympathetic character, and you can't help but feel so much for him throughout this whole segment when all this horrible stuff is happening to him by these horrible sort of rich folks that live across the street from where he is. And what happens to him is just so tragic, but yet at the same time, it does make you wonder, since he is very much in tune with the occult, given that he does talk to his wife via a Ouija board, it kind of makes me wonder though, like, did he like kill himself because of all the horrible things that happened, or did he do it so he can finally get his revenge on these people? Because like you say, Stephanie, now that I think about it, all those Valentine's Day cards all had the same handwriting. So it makes me wonder, it's like he subconsciously kind of thinking, wait a second. Although I have to say though, one thing that did make me laugh, and this might be just a little inconsistent thing with the film, is like we do have a scene where Grimsdyke has his funeral. It's a beautiful, lovely sort of cemetery he's at, and then when he kind of rises from the grave like a year later, it's a completely different cemetery.
And it looks like it's been sitting there for 50 years with no one tending to it.
And all the gravestones are much more closer to his as well. It was just like a weird thing that, again, it made me laugh more than anything. So I can't be.
Yeah, I did have a giggle because I'm like, this is a year later. Why does this look like 50 years later?
As we all know, things can change a lot in the course of a year.
Yeah, maybe they dealt with a pandemic.
Exactly.
I do like that he got the dickhead dad to pay for his funeral before he went and murdered his son. It's like, oh yeah, that's a nice little cherry on top.
Exactly.
Gotta love it. Gotta love well-deserved revenge.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's one of the things I'm sort of enjoying about. Oh, I guess most of the stories in this film is like a lot of them are basically stories of comeuppance. That always plays a part of a lot of anthology stories. Although the next one, though, is slightly different. And that, of course, is the segment Wish You Were Here, which is taken from issue 22 of The Hauntifier. Although it is also a variation on the W.W. Jacobs short story, The Monkey's Paw, which gets name dropped in this very segment. And of course, this...
Yeah, they didn't want the audience going on about that. They're like, no, we know.
Exactly.
You pointed out.
They'll be like, wait a second, this is a ripoff of The Monkey's Paw. It's like, oh, don't worry, we know about this. But this segment tells the story of a husband and wife who are facing financial ruin. And then one day, the wife remembers that they had this statue from China, like in their house, that they randomly just remembered just then. It's like, oh, apparently this statue can grant free wishes. And so they decide to send a wish, and of course, like if anyone knows about the Monkey's Paw story, the wishes themselves don't quite turn out exactly as they wished for. But Stephanie, tell us your thoughts on Wish You Were Here.
Yeah, I love a Monkey's Paw retelling, whether it's this or The Simpsons. It's a lot of fun. But this was interesting in that Freddie Francis did a Monkey's Paw episode of the TV show in its final episode, or its final season, though it used an actual monkey's paw. So it's a little bit on the money. But yeah, you're absolutely right. This one veers away. I mean, I guess it's a little bit more of a petty morality tale. It's like, oh, well, you shouldn't wish for things, you need to make them happen. You need to work hard and be patient. And she even kind of joke wished it. She's like, oh, money, of course. And like, next thing you know, dead husband.
And insurance.
Yeah. Insurance. Eternal pain. And if you look at the original comic, it is nasty. It gets to the point where he's being hacked into bits until he's literally a pile of red guts. And they like look closer, and it's like something about the guts seemed like they were screaming, still feeling the pain. And you're like, Jesus Christ. So I'm glad that this one got into the guts. We saw some nice intestines and everything. Yeah, no, it's fun. It's a pretty straightforward segment. I feel like they had a lot of fun with this one. I do like when she made her second wish of having him back. Literally, the pallbearers just walk through her front door to set up the gas, and then they're just on their way. So yeah, it's this is like I guess a nice palate cleanser, and it really does feel like an issue from the EC Comics.
And what did you think of this one, Marcy?
Yeah, like I felt like you could pick up straight away like this is sort of a take on the monkey's paw, which is fine because it's a real, you know, using that kind of like analogy for a story really works because you know, when you kind of, I think it's just sort of just to kind of point out that things are just don't get handed to you without repercussions. You know, if you inherit a business or something, well, then you need to put in the work. Otherwise, it's just going to kind of fuck up. You might want all this responsibility, but there's a lot of work to it. You know, that kind of thing. So, you know, the couple kind of, things are going a bit shit, but then they realize, oh, hey, this figurine apparently grants wishes. And when she kind of jokingly does it, and then, oh, the husband's dead. And it's like, wait, oh, well, maybe you should have been more specific about maybe how you wanted money, or just maybe all your debts magically paid off something. But that's kind of like part of it. It's, you know, a lot of people tend to, not a lot of people, but in sort of stories like this, there's the skeptical thing of these, you know, having wishes granted and not considering that maybe you really need to be very specific, otherwise some bad shit's going to happen. But yeah, when she wants the husband back and the way she words it, just as he was before the accident, well, he's still dead in that awesome visual, it coming in the casket with the pallbearers. Like visually, that is a really incredible scene. Like it's so shocking because that's not what you're expecting. But he ended up having a heart attack before the car crash. So yeah, he's still dead, but then she still wants to bring him back and live forever, but he's living forever as an embalmed body, and she cannot kill him because he is living forever, even if he's going to be just writhing in pain. And that's kind of a very shocking and also very sad moment. Like you think, I don't want to have that as my fate at all. And I think they actually filmed it with enough kind of, you know, with the guts and stuff, but just did it in a way that wasn't overly bloody, but still really damn effective. But yeah, it was a very good kind of palate cleanser from the previous episode and kind of prepare us for the final segment.
Yeah, well, I gotta say, out of all, even as terrible as the outcomes of all the wishes are in this segment, none of them will ever top having a turkey sandwich that's a little bit dry. I'm just saying. But I really enjoyed this segment. I do love a monkey's paw like type of scenario because, like you said, both say, you got to be very specific on how you ask for wishes, because you can't just say, oh, I just want money. You don't know how you're going to get that money. Somebody you know might die or suffer a terrible fate if you get that money. So you kind of have to be very specific about all this stuff. But I did really enjoy this segment. I think the performances are all really solid in this one. But I will admit, once the wife asks for her husband to come back, and then once he comes alive and he's screaming, and then you sort of find out, oh, he's fully embalmed, he's not fully himself in that, and he's just screaming, and then of course you see the guts and everything. It's such an unsettling moment in that segment that it actually took me aback as well, and it was just such a and also just a great way to kind of end the segment on, because it just like once the segment finishes, like you're still like kind of reeling from that whole visual like for the rest of the movie, because it's so unsettling. And I know there are some cuts of this film that actually take out the quick shot of the guts, so younger audiences can see this film. I don't know why, but
The completely bloodless guts.
exactly. But it's such a really effective little tale, and like I would say it's one of my favorites of this film, but it's definitely a pretty solid little segment that I would say out of all of them, it definitely has the most unsettling moments throughout it.
Mm.
We'll move right along to our fifth and final segment before we talk about the wraparound, which of course is Blind Alleys. Oh, actually, before we get to that one,
I'm so sorry.
That's
I thought you said reach around and I was about to die.
wraparound, sorry.
I think you watched a different movie than we did.
No,
That's what you do in a porno anthology. You have the reach around.
Oh, that would be brilliant if they called it that.
I'm gonna do that right
Do
now.
it.
Anyway,
Yes.
I'm sorry, Bede.
I was going to say before I get to Blind Alleys that what you said, Stephanie, about how this Wish You Were Here was done for the TV show. I was going to bring up that fact that, Freddie Francis actually directed that segment, so he kind of remade his own segment from this film for the TV show. So I thought that was
I
actually...
did not know that.
Yeah, so I thought it was actually a pretty interesting way. So it kind of... Yeah, so I'll have to check out that segment for sure to see how...
Yeah, I feel like I need to watch like the episodes of that were on the TV series as well that were in this. I think it'd be interesting to see a different take on it.
Yeah, well, the next segment, Blind Alleys, was also adapted for the TV show under the title of Revenge is the Nuts. That's the episode title. But for this film, it's just called Blind Alleys. This one was taken from issue 46 of Tales from the Crypt, when at a sort of a hospital for blind people, they sort of hire a new, I guess you would call it kind of like someone to run the hospital, a major from the army played by Nigel Patrick, and he's clearly has no idea what he's doing. And of course, the all the blind people who live there are suffering under his care. And of course, as Tales of the Crypt style, they decide to take their revenge on him. So, Steph, tell us your thoughts on Blind Alleys.
Oh, I've always had a soft spot for this one. The first time I ever saw this movie, I don't know, I became a little bit obsessed with it. I would just think back to it all the time. Part of it was the cruelty from the major, just like, he wouldn't stop saying, well, I was in the military. In the military, it's this way. And they're like, we're not soldiers. We're blind people in a home. And he just keeps cutting the budget while he eats steaks. And him and his German Shepherd just live in luxury while they don't get any heating. They barely get food. Oh, it's so terrible because the actors playing the blind residents are just so wonderful. They play it so realistically. It makes everything very effective, in my opinion. And the man is Patrick Magee, the great Patrick Magee, and his face is, I don't know what it is, just every little emotion, every thought just projects out to the point where I don't know. He was the absolute perfect casting choice, but the build is wonderful. You want to see this asshole get it so bad, and he does. And it's they lure him. They learn the dog, start starving the dog, which is sad, but he'll get his meal, so it's not too bad. But just having to, watching this guy who's been terrorizing these poor people be put in that position, be powerless, not knowing what's going on. I love it. And that razor blade hallway, I always thought that'd be really good in a haunted house. Obviously not with real razor blades, but just have people look at it, freak out, and they're like, oh, it's rubber. Okay. And then walk through it.
Marcy, what did you think of Blind Alleys? I know you have a lot to say about this one because you were telling me about it like in our texts the other day.
Yes,
Ooh.
this one got me very worked up. Look, I actually think this with the Peter Cushing episode, maybe my favorite as well. Like the two ones I found the strongest. Yeah, because this is a home to look after these blind people, and this guy comes in to run it, and he's just a dick. He is a very definition of ableist fuckface, and I really fucking wanted him to get his comeuppance, and I'm so glad that he did when this movie became Saw. I'm kind of thinking like we could link this to Saw. Jeez. Yeah, it is hardcore with those razor blades, but as these poor residents are suffering for no fucking reason, and he's like, well, you don't need this, you're blind. I'm like, how the fuck do they not need these things because they're blind? Go fuck yourself, dickhead. Shove your ableist crap up your ass. Like, fuck off. Yeah, it got me very, very worked up, let me tell you. It's like, I'm sorry, they do not deserve any of this. They have not done anything wrong. They simply do not have their sight, and you have no reason to treat them like they're beneath you. So when they hatch this very jigsaw-esque plan, like I'm there going, oh man, I can't wait to see what shit this dude's gonna have to deal with. I did feel bad for the dog, but as Stephanie said, it does get a very big meal. And I kind of thought, you know what, that really defines poetic justice. And there is no way you do not 100% sympathize with the residents, because this guy is just being a fucking douchebag, McGee, like full fucking fuckface McGee. But yeah, like it's so effective. It's got a really strong emotional core, and yeah, the performances are fantastic. Like really, really well done. And yeah, just the thought of that very small hallway with razor blades just is like, "Bleh. No, thank you."
I
Give me
really
nightmares.
I really enjoyed Blind Alleys a lot. Although I gotta say though, it must have been really messed up in the early 70s that somebody who has never worked with blind people before could like get a job at a hospital for blind people to run it. Like that would never happen today, obviously.
Well, we hope.
Yeah, we hope.
Yeah. Do you know anything about blind people? He's like, no, why would I? Oh, I don't know.
It's like, really?
But Nigel Patrick, who does play the Major, I think he made a very effective, like, horrible character. Like, he gave a pretty good performance as that. But it really is, like you say, Stephanie, Patrick McGee's performance, because, like, he just has, his face kind of just says everything. Like, even when he's not talking, like, you can see all the little mannerisms in his face, and like that tells us everything that's going on in his head. And, like, you see all this sort of treatment that these poor blind people are facing under being the Major, being under the Major. And I'm thinking like, these characters are definitely going to take their revenge on him. How are they going to do it? And I would not expect in a million years that they would create basically like a maze with razor blades on the walls, especially in one section that's very narrow that you'd have to be very careful when you kind of slide through there or you'll get cut up really badly. And of course, the icing on the cake, of course, they've had the dog locked up, he hadn't eaten for days, and then they just let him loose as soon as he sees the Major, and the dog had a good meal that night. Let's just say that. But I think it's a really solid and effective segment, and it had just such a great ending to it as well. And of course, like you say, Marcy, it has great themes on talking about ableism as well, especially in something like this in the early 70s as well.
Yeah, and institutional corruption too. That's done really well,
big
because
time, yeah.
that kind of stuff happens all the time.
Oh, for sure.
Absolutely.
But so that's all the segments from the film, and then we get to the wraparound, not the reach around.
I'm so sorry.
Which, of course, all of our major characters, like from the segments, like Joan Collins, Ian Hendry, Richard Green, Robin Phillips, and Nigel Patrick are all on this little tour in this underground crypt, and then they get lost, and then they meet the Crypt Keeper, played by Oscar-winning actor Ralph Richardson. Although I'm very disappointed that Ralph Richardson portrays his performance as a monk and doesn't say like ghoul or dead puns throughout this entire screen time.
Yeah.
I'm very disappointed. But I mean, I will admit, I think the segment, I mean, the wraparound is solid, but I kind of knew exactly where how it was going to turn out, because it seems like that, and spoilers for most Amicus horror produced anthology horror films, they always have the same kind of twist at the end all of most of them. So I didn't think it hit me, this wraparound hit me as much as, say, as other wraparounds have. But what did you both think of this wraparound? But you first, Stephanie.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, you pretty much know where it's going, but I think the segments were so satisfying, especially with these terrible, terrible baddies really getting what was coming to them, that by the end, you're like, yeah, just throw them in the bin. I mean, in hell, same thing. Just move them on. And it's just, it doesn't waste your time. I think the movie knows that you know. So it's like, oh, yeah, let's walk them into hell. Though, there is that moment where we get a little bit of that Crypt Keeper where he's like, and who's next? Perhaps you? So at least we get a taste of it. So yeah, it's nothing impressive or special, and it is nice when thought is put into the reach rounds. Sorry, wraparounds. But I think it's fine. I think yeah.
But Marcy, what did you think of this wraparound?
Yeah, for the wraparound. Now I'm going to keep saying reach around. I don't mean to. Yeah, I like the whole thing. Like, I thought it was an interesting setup with, sort of they're on this tour, but then they all get like lured into this room, and I don't know. Maybe I just wasn't thinking. I don't know. I didn't realize actually where it was going to go. I thought maybe like they would leave and try and reform their ways or something, but it's like, no, you're going straight to hell because you're a dickhead. And I'm like, oh, I like this. I can get behind that because they deserve to burn for a very long time.
Exactly.
Because they're just horrible, horrible people. But yeah, I thought it was pretty effective. I quite liked it. I felt like, yeah, like each segment kind of went as long as it needed to, and then the little breakup with the wrap around, I think, worked quite well. So yeah.
Awesome. I guess that could be a wrap on Tales from the Crypt. We'll go around and say our final thoughts and rating for this film. So Stephanie, what are your final thoughts and rating for Tales from the Crypt? Out of 5, I was going.
Okay. I would give it a solid 4 out of 5. There are really no duds in this, so maybe I'll give it a 4.5. It's just that classic. You get a full course of your anthology. The morality tales really pay off. It's just nasty enough. It's just creepy enough. The acting is incredible. It looks really good. It's a really good looking film. No, it's solid. I don't think it's really aging at all. I think it's just kind of one of those timeless stories. So yes, I am a fan.
And Marcy, what are your final thoughts and rating for this film?
Yeah, I give this a 4 dickheads getting comeuppance out of 5. It's a really enjoyable and quite effective film that I really, really enjoyed. And if people haven't seen it, like check it out. Don't be afraid to dive into, older horror cinema. And it feels weird saying older for like the early 70s when I think of like older horror being like silent movies. But some people just don't watch anything that's like 5 years old. I don't know. People are weird.
Yeah.
But it's it's really, really good. I'm so glad I had the chance to check this out for the show.
Yeah, well, I initially gave this film 3.5 when I first watched it, but now kind of going through this episode and talking about this film with the both of you, I'm definitely going to amp up my rating a little bit. I'm going to give this 4 out of 5 as well. I think all the segments are pretty strong. Even the weakest ones are still a lot of fun as well. And I think all the cast do great work with their performances. And, I think if anyone who is a fan of the Tales from the Crypt TV show should definitely check out this film and kind of see a different sort of variation of the stories from all the EC comics. And particularly since 3 of the stories from this film were, of course, adapted for the TV show. So I think a lot of people should definitely check out the film, kind of sort of see how they compare, but to see how, see a British take on these stories. And we'll move right along to our next anthology film, which of course is the 2019 film The Mortuary Collection.
This poor soul's journey has come to an end. From dust we started, to dust we return. Every corpse tells a story. It is our task to listen.
So these are all stories about how people died.
Some tales even I find too unsettling to recount.
She's dead! You gotta get that body out of your apartment.
Keep your doors locked tonight and keep an eye out for crazies.
Monster!
That's pretty cool.
Yes, it is, isn't it? There's no use running. Your story is just beginning.
Which was written and directed by Ryan Spindell, and it stars Clancy Brown, Caitlin Custer, Christine Kilmer, Jacob Elordi, Barack Hartley, Sarah Hay, and Mike C. Nelson. And if there's any names amongst the cast that I butchered accidentally, please forgive me. And the plot summary for this film is an eccentric mortician recounts several macabre and phantasmagorical... I clearly can't say anything tonight. Well, I'll say several macabre tales that he's encountered in his distinguished career. Again, I apologize for that. But Stephanie, what are your initial thoughts on The Mortuary Collection?
Well, I'm really glad that you're covering it, because I originally saw it at Fantastic Fest and I didn't really like it that much. It didn't really hit me very well. It didn't really stick with me, but I knew I wasn't feeling very well when I saw it. So I shelved it. I'm like, all right, this is not the film's fault. I'm not in the right frame of mind. So I've been meaning to revisit it. And I'm so glad I did, because I really enjoyed it so much more this time around. It's not quite on my list of top favorites, but it's really solid overall. And I'm glad anthology horror is still being made. And looking so good and getting such talented actors. So that's that right at the bat. Just I'm very satisfied as a horror anthology nerd that they're still getting full-length films made of them. But yeah, I love Clancy Brown too. Like I will watch him in anything, and he is terrific in this.
Oh yeah, he is a treasure, Clancy Brown. We can never love Clancy Brown enough on this show.
Yeah.
But Marcy, what are your initial thoughts on The Mortuary Collection? Because you and I both watched this as part of the Fantasia Film Festival as well when we covered it 2 years back.
Yeah, and I was super impressed by it when we did see it then. It's just it looks wonderful. The production, the set design, just everything. It looks fantastic. Like it's whatever budget it had just made use of every little cent with it. And yeah, I like how it opens up where we have this like town of Ravens End and we meet this mortician. I think it's Montgomery Dark, played by the great Clancy Brown. And so we kind of see as this this young girl comes in saying she's wants to help out from a help wanted sign or something. I can't quite remember what it was.
She saw a help wanted sign out the front and wanted to work with him.
Yeah, and you're kind of like questioning that already. because this place is fucking creepy as shit. But yeah, once it gets into the actual stories, and they're very much stories of yeah, we'll get to that. And then yeah, I really appreciated like how different each story was, how interesting each story was, but then the wraparound actually flowed really well. And then it comes to this really, really good, really well set up kind of twist and twist ending. Like I was really damn impressed that it sort of handled all these things. But what I really like, and we'll obviously get into it a bit more, that the stories, like the segments, kind of take place in different decades, and I really liked that. So it has quite a few different things that we don't often see in horror anthology like this. And yeah, as Steph said, like seriously, it's so great to see such a well-made horror anthology like in the past couple of years. Like it's so good. Keep doing it, please. We love it. Don't stop.
And we can make more episodes on it for the show.
Exactly.
I really do love the Mortuary Collection. Like, I don't know the exact budget of what this film was, because I've been trying to find information on it. I just can't seem to find it anywhere. But whatever the budget was, they did a fantastic job putting every set on the screen. I imagine it was a very low budget, but it looks like an A-grade film when you watch it. It just, visually, it just looks spectacular. It's got a great atmosphere, great cinematography. And I do love the fact that they shot this film in Astoria, Oregon, which of course is the setting where one of my favorite films of all time, The Goonies, was shot. So I definitely sort of was like watching this film thinking like, why do I get this vibe like this town is like the one from The Goonies? And it is, which made me very excited. But I do love like the stories in this one. I think they're all really good. Clancy Brown is fantastic. It's really well directed. And I like that this is one of the few anthology horror films where the stories kind of get better and better as they go along. And we'll talk about those right now before we go to the wraparound, not the reach around. But we'll talk about the very first segment, which doesn't have a title, but it's the shortest one of the ones that are in this film, which of course is, like you say, Marcia, and I think this was a really awesome way to how they approach the segment, is having each segment set in a different decade. So the first one is set in the 1950s, and it tells the story about a woman named Emma who's a pickpocket. And so she goes and hides off in the bathroom and sort of gets all the money out of wallets. And then she hears a weird noise coming from the medicine cabinet. And we'll leave that there until we go further into it in our discussion. But Stephanie, what did you think of this very first segment for the film?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned how the film looked in the locations, because they found incredible houses for this. Even this bathroom feels like a character by itself. It was just so cool. And yeah, the way they messed with the space and how large it actually was wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this was such a clever way to start this. Just a nice short little gotcha. Just visually stunning. Yeah, just pretty young woman. She's a klepto. She's going through her goods, and then the medicine cabinet, and then we get a little bit of Lovecraft, a little tentacles there. And yeah, there's not much to it, but it's incredibly well done. It's a little gruesome, a little funny, a little cheeky. It sets the tone really well. So and in the wraparound after it, she mentions like, oh, that was cute. That was an okay story. So yeah, it's just kind of giving you a great little taste of the personality.
And what did you think of this short little segment, Marcy?
Yeah, definitely agree with what Steph has had to say. Like the room almost becomes like a character, and it's really well shot and acted, and how everything is set up. And it is a really good, simple story because, obviously this girl's doing the wrong thing. And, there's a monster hidden in the walls of the house that if you do the wrong thing, it's just going to fuck you up with its, tentacles and stuff. So I do like these kind of stories, like having something to say, kind of teach you a lesson, that kind of thing. And I'm trying to think, what was one of the anthology films that we did for the King Zone not too long ago? Quicksilver Highway, I think.
Yeah, Quicksilver Highway, yeah.
Yeah, we kind of found that like that didn't really have much to say, or at least we couldn't really kind of work that out too much. And at least with like these two films, and it's good that we've kind of paired them together because I think they actually work really well as a like horror anthology double bill. There is definitely a message in there, and it makes sense. Like you get what it's going for, and I really do like that. So yeah, I think it's a really good one, and it's it's the perfect way to really like set the tone because things are going to get more insane from here.
Oh, for sure. And I think the first time I saw this segment, I thought it was okay. Kind of like the character of Sam says in the after when the segment is over, which I thought was a very clever way of saying like, oh yeah, it's a good segment, but there's not really any substantial stuff to it. So I got to give Ryan Spindell credit for at least it kind of putting that sort of like self-awareness in the film. But I think the short on itself is still a really fun little one. And I got to say, I didn't mention this before, but again, like I don't know what the budget of this film was, but I just love the fact that they did such a great job with the production and costume designs throughout this entire film and sort of replicating each decade perfectly. And it's very apparent in this short little scene with the bathroom just looking as spectacular as it is, and also the dress that the character of Emma is wearing. And yeah, it's just like a solid little short that, again, that's kind of more like that little appetizer to everything that's about to come in the rest of the film. Like, again, it is a very short segment, but it kind of just like sets the tone for everything that's about to come. We'll move along to segment number 2, which goes by the title of Unprotected, which of course tells us is set in the 60s, follows a frat boy named Jake, played by Australian actor Jacob Elordi. And pretty much he goes around and gives out condoms to women. So, because he's into sexual liberation for all women and all that. But what he's really doing is he just wants to get laid, pretty much. And then he meets a young woman. They have sex, and he gets his comeuppance in the best possible way as well. And Stephanie, tell us your thoughts on this segment, Unprotected.
This one I was a little torn on. And it's interesting that was the 70s. That was, of course, a big decade for feminism. But I don't know if college guys would have been throwing around the word patriarchy as much it was. That felt a little bit more modern, the way they're using it to manipulate the young women. But that's not my main problem. It's just something I noticed. There's a lot, again, great performances. It looks wonderful. It has kind of a fun, hunky guy, dorky, best friend, frat boy setting, which is always ripe for possibilities. And when we meet Jake, we're like, oh, he's handsome and he just wants to sleep with everyone and lie to them to do it. But then he has this moment where he talks about like actually falling in love, and he's saying this to his guy friend. He's not trying to impress anyone. And you're like, oh, like he's in pain and he's just kind of acting this way as a front. But then after he does have sex, he's just a complete asshole and, pretends he doesn't know her until he can no longer pretend he doesn't know her after his little doctor visit there. So yeah, I thought the motivations of Jake were a little unclear enough that I didn't completely fall for this. But that aside, this is nasty. It's gooey. Pregnancy horror usually delivers. I'm kind of squeaked out by that topic in general. And this one doesn't hold back. So, on the surface, it's really fun. It delivers. But I just had some issues with the characters.
And what did you think of this one, Marcy? Unprotected.
Yeah, I think this might be my quote unquote favorite segment, and that might just be the feminist in me saying that. But it does take because this is we established it was the 60s, so we're kind of the decade was kind of like there's more of a rise in feminism, and it really shows you like I guess how much has not changed with toxic masculinity and this whole college or frat culture of just fuck anything that moves, bump up your numbers, blah blah blah. Doesn't matter who you're hurting, whatever. But yeah, like as he, has a condom on, but then stealths and takes it off, which is very disgusting. It's just gross. Don't do that. Don't be that fucking dickhead, please. And then what happens to him, because he's such a fucking dickhead, and clearly there's a lot of fucking dickheads, and they probably deserved everything they got in the end. He ends up pregnant with a demon mutant baby, and pretty much there's only one way he can give birth to the thing growing in him, because he ended up getting pregnant, because it turns the tables on well, what if men can get pregnant? I'm sure they take things much more seriously if that was the case. Yeah, fucking right it would be. Just saying. Yeah, and he has this thing growing inside him, and they're like, well, there's only one way that thing's going to come out. And his dick explodes. He dies. Mutant baby. And then we see a whole slew of mutant babies, because men are fucking disgusting. Truly. I stand by that. Look, if you know anything about me, you know I'm a raging feminist. And yeah, this one appeals to all of that. And it just has so much that I think to say. And yeah, I think a little bit, yeah, the character, the main dude, he's just such a dude, bro. There's nothing else to it. And I don't even think it really cared about doing that, because why should we care, honestly, when this guy does fucking disgusting, sick behavior? So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah,
Sorry, Seth.
Oh,
you
sorry.
go ahead.
It's just that saying, if men could get pregnant, abortion would be sacrosanct. And that's definitely touched on here. If men could get pregnant, he would not be stealthing. He would take it seriously. And she confronts him. She's like, I thought you used protection. And he looks guilty. And she's like, yeah, well, I'm going to go on another date. So yeah, that's a really wonderful part of it.
I really enjoyed this segment as well, even as with men being pregnant, but that's a whole different story right there. But but I enjoyed the segment because, like you say, Marcy, out of all this is definitely a very feminist-centric piece, and I think it does a really good job at showing just how douchey some guys can be, especially when they just want to have sex and not even think of the repercussions or what their partner is thinking. And then, of course, it kind of turns the tables, showing, what would happen if a man could get pregnant? And as somebody who has played a pregnant man in a short film, this segment really appealed to me, but that's a whole different story right there. But yeah, it's just a really good one. And I like that we see this character of Jake gets thrown into the ringer, kind of showing what it's like to be pregnant. But of course, it's the more extreme version, since he's got a demon baby inside of him. And I did laugh at the scene where he wants to go see the girl Sandra. That's the girl who got him pregnant. And then of course he gets cornered by his fraternity brothers, and basically they're doing a ritual on him. And then all of a sudden, this film does its version of his water breaking, and it's such a gross kind of scene, and you see all their faces as all this gunk and everything just squirts all over them, and they just don't know how to take that whole situation. And of course, when he goes to her parents' place, I like how the parents are like, oh, really, Sandra? Again? But it's well, we better get this demon baby out. And then, of course, the penis explodes, which, that's the thing, I've always heard, joked about for ages. If men ever got pregnant, where would the baby come out? It's it'd come out of the penis. And this film kind of shows that in all its hilarious, disgusting glory. And,
to be fair, you could probably just do a C-section, but...
Yeah. Well, they didn't think about that. It was too late.
But that wanker did not deserve it.
Yeah,
he deserved an exploded penis.
Exactly. But I think it's a really fun segment, and I like how it ends. The mother of Sandra goes up to this room, puts the baby down in crib, and is like, "Oh, there's also these other demon babies that are also in this house as well." And like you say, it's a good symbolic thing. It's there are probably there are also other douchey guys out there that who definitely tried to take advantage of Sandra, and she got them pregnant. So, and I think it's a good one. Again, it has an interesting moral question at the center of it. And, you know, as a guy, I think it's one that men should watch and just realize, you know what, guys, you need to treat women better, especially when it comes to sex. So I really enjoyed this segment a lot. And it's, again, it kind of has a mixture of the gross out. It has good laughs, and it's got a good, interesting themes at the center of it as well. We'll move along to segment number 3, which is called Till Death, and this one is set in the 70s and follows a guy named Wendell, whose wife Carol is now catatonic, and he's sort of in a very sort of feels like he's kind of trapped in this existence, looking after his wife, and he's at a point where he wishes, like, you know, she would just sort of pass on already, and then his doctor gives him some medicine that would at least, you know, help with dying in her sleep. So he organizes that, but then when she touches his hand, he's like freaks out and realizes, oh, he's made a mistake. Unfortunately, though, it just gets worse and worse for him from there. But Stephanie, tell us your thoughts on the segment Till Death.
Yeah, this one, it's hard to talk about this one for me for some reason. I'm a little bit mixed on this one as well. To me, like, if you show someone who is very ill and powerless through their illness and they're kind of used as a prop, I think that needs to be handled very carefully. I do think that the husband showing like how stressful it was, how monotonous it was, that was a great part. That was really wonderful work into it to make it a lot more emotionally effective. But then when it gets some more ghoulish parts with the accidental impalement, then stuffing her into a trunk, and then all the elevator hijinks, it was such a tonal shift for me. I wasn't quite sure what they were going for at the end. And the end is kind of a great Tales from the Crypt-esque ending, you know, like he thinks he's going to hell, and then they kind of just find him going mad. I don't know. It felt like it kind of wanted it both ways, to the point where it felt like he's being a little bit emotionally manipulative, but then also on kind of the goofy gore part. So while I don't think it's bad at all, this is the one I kind of struggled with the most when it came to just enjoying it.
What about yourself, Marcy?
Yeah, it's probably the segment I liked the least, I think. It's sort of difficult to pin down what the whole thing was trying to say. And it is really like an actual very sad story. And I suppose it does raise questions of should somebody be forced to live in that catatonic state, all of that stuff. So it can be very complex and emotional stuff. And then it does get really over the top. Like, I think the stuff in like the elevator is done pretty well, and the ending kind of, it throws you for a loop a little bit. But I'm not sure like what its actual intentions were, and just with how, I guess, clear cut some of the other ones are, this one just didn't feel as clear cut. And I think maybe the story itself just was a bit maybe not like the best one to have in this kind of thing, but I kind of get like that they're trying to do things different and explore things in the different decades. But for me, I think it was probably the weakest one, even though I think the performance from, and I can't remember the actor's name already.
That would be Barrick Hadley.
I think he's actually really, really good. Like, he does a fantastic job in the role. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say on that one.
I think I might have enjoyed this segment a little bit more than both of you, but I can definitely see your points why it didn't quite 100% work for the both of you, because it is kind of like two completely different kind of segments kind of strung together. Because you got this first half that is very sort of very serious, very bleak, as we kind of see this guy kind of coping with his wife being catatonic, the stresses of looking after someone who's in that state, and kind of like, in a way, not wishing like, oh, she would be out of his life forever, but more like, you know, so she can finally just be free, and just from this kind of pain that she's going through. And even like when the doctor brings up, oh yeah, I got these pills that could help. At first he's like just shrugs off, oh well, I'll just throw those pills in the piles, the other ones. And it's not till the doctor says, you need to listen to what I'm actually saying. And then of course once he gives her the pills and then she starts moving around, then he realizes, oh shit, I've made a mistake. I don't want to do this. And then once she goes head first into, I'm trying to remember what the ornament was. What was the ornament again? It was like this sort of animal ornament. She goes straight head first into it and is impaled. And then, of course, from there, it kind of gets the sort of very dark, gory kind of horror comedy. Like, it does feel such a tonal contrast to everything that was leading up to that moment, particularly where he basically, she can't fit inside the box, he has to like cut off her legs to get her in there. And of course all the hijinks in the elevator as well. Like I could definitely see like the massive tonal shift would be very off-putting to people for sure. But I don't know, I think the segment still worked for me, but I think it was really more the kind of emotional core of this segment, and especially kind of listening to the girl at the end of the segment, because she says, well, I don't know, this segment's a bit more complex. I don't know if he actually did anything truly wrong. And I think that's kind of one of the things I think I do appreciate about this segment. It's like it could have easily have made the character of Wendell such a truly evil character, but it makes him far more kind of complex because we can see why everything is happening and why he feels the way that he does.
Yeah, this one's more like you know, a decent person in a very difficult situation.
Yeah.
Whereas like the previous two, it's like you're kind of doing something a bit shitty. Here's your comeuppance kind of thing.
And they did show him truly loving his wife. He wasn't like, oh, I wish she would just choke already or anything. You know, he really took wonderful care of her. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's a very interesting, if tonally uneven, but interestingly complicated kind of segment. And I think I always keep thinking about this segment every now and again, and maybe that's kind of the point, and maybe because it is kind of uneven in what it wants to say and how it approaches its tone makes it kind of more, at least maybe not my favorite segment of the whole film, but definitely one of the more interesting ones for me. But we'll move right along to segment number 4, which is what I'm very excited to talk about, which of course is the babysitter murders. And this is where the character Sam, who is the young girl who goes to apply for the job at Montgomery Dark's mortuary, we find out that she is there because of this young boy whose funeral was earlier in that day. And she says, I knew this boy. I want to tell you now my story about him. So we go into this story, and she's the main character of this one. And she's babysitting the young boy named Logan one night. And as she's sort of doing her stuff around the house, making dinner, watching a slasher movie on the TV, since it is set in the 80s. And then we get a news report saying that a riot has happened at the local insane asylum. Someone has escaped, and it's a serial killer of children. And of course, someone comes to the house, all beaten up, confused, and acting wild. And then that's just the beginning of a very insane little story. So Stephanie, tell us your thoughts on the babysitter murders.
Yeah, this one is just, it's kind of anthologies at their best. You do get a nice twist, but it's not about the twist. They make sure they're giving you kind of fun action, a little bit of mystery, just like a really fun ride all the way through. I really like just the classic tropes. I love the slasher thing. Hey, again, going back to Tales from the Crypt, we have someone who escaped from the asylum and they're out to kill people. So that's nice to see another approach to that. Of course, babysitters getting terrorized. Wonderful. It's hard to go wrong with that. No, this was a lot of fun. And Sam throughout, I found her a little irritating in the wraparounds. She says she's in for a job interview, but she's like incredibly sassy to the person she's allegedly having this interview for. And, it's good because you kind of piece together, okay, she has ulterior motives. But I think it would have been better if she was a little more sly and teasing about it instead of like, old man, that's not a good story. I'm going to tell you how it is. But this was a great way to tie that in and really redeemed her character for me. No, it's great. You know, child in peril. That's always effective. The doctor who is throughout the segments, he got a terrible surprise at the end. It turns out it was his child being babysat, and she wasn't the babysitter.
Exactly.
Yes, a male babysitter. No one would ever see that coming. But they played it really well. That I'm sure it was a balancing act. And I think they pulled it off really well. It was really fun. There's a death with a television that I think is the best death with a television since Freddy Krueger did it. I was not expecting to see that extreme close-up. That was wonderful. And then it kind of ends with, you know, that urban legend where the babysitter gets high and puts the baby in the microwave. It's a little bit of a nod to that. So yeah, this one, it's just a great time.
And what did you think of this one, Marcy?
Yeah, I actually really liked how this one really tied into the actual wraparound segments to really like bring it full circle. And it completely just throws like the babysitter with a killer on the loose kind of thing trope like on its head, that it gives you these like this twist like she's not the fucking babysitter, she's the maniac wanting to kill children. Like, it's messed up, it's surprising, and it works really well. Like, I think it's a really good an intense little segment, and I think it's actually everything's really, really well handled. Like, it's one that you, I think, get really invested in because you're kind of a little unsure, and you know, like, okay, this kind of maybe ties into the wraparound segment a bit, into the character of the is it Sam? Was it
Sam?
Yeah. So I think that, like, in itself was kind of intriguing because, like, oh, okay, this is interesting. But yeah, it's very surprising. It's very brutal, and I think it's just really effective. Like, it really works. I like that they completely like turn that trope like on its head with this really like gruesome twist, and you're like, holy fucking shit! Well, kudos to you. Bloody hell. I'm getting names like so confused. Ryan Spindell. Kudos, Ryan Spindell. You fucking pulled off some good shit, bro.
I gotta say, I think after I watched this segment from the film, I just immediately thought to myself, this is some next level shit. Because what I really loved about this segment is Ryan Spindell did such a phenomenal job. Sort of, when you watch this segment, you would think, oh, it's like your standard babysitter versus a serial killer story. And you don't think much of it and that until the final twist comes in at the end. You find out that Sam, whose real name is actually Charlotte, is actually the serial killer who escaped. And she not only kills children, but she also steals their teeth, because I believe in the film she's known as the Tooth Fairy Killer. And I was blown away when that twist came out because I was not expecting it.
Yeah, it's so unexpected. It's so well set up that you probably should have seen it, but you don't. It's great.
Yeah, and even rewatching the film again in prep for this show, like, I took notice this time, now knowing the twist, like, took notice on how it's set up. And even rewatching the segment again, Ryan Spindell did, on the writing front, did such a great job in the setup. Like, once you know the twist, like, you can definitely see the hints for sure, but like, you can see how it's all set up really well where you would never even think it would go into that twist in the last half. And the fact that at first you think, oh, babysitter is a girl, she's going up a serial killer who's a man, but in reality, the guy was actually the babysitter, which is always, you know, kind of something we don't see a lot in both in film and real life, male babysitters. But they do exist, of course. But people would not associate men being babysitters. So that was like an interesting and smart way of kind of spinning that trope on its head for this segment, because it's not you would automatically think, oh, young girl, she's the babysitter, not the guy.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry, you go.
Oh, okay. No, I'm sorry. Just like when they have that slasher movie in the background, they keep referencing it. That's a great little nod. Of course, the young, pretty blonde is the babysitter. It always is in these slasher movies.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And it's just so really well directed as well. It's very brutal, like the action set pieces, like the fights between Sam/Charlotte and the male babysitter are so brutal and really well executed. Like it feels like you're watching like The Raid or something like that. It's just like in terms of like how these action set pieces are set up. And even then though, again, like, yeah, she's fighting pretty brutal as well. And then you think, oh yeah, because she's a serial killer, she would know how to fight and stuff, but you just don't think about that stuff. You think, oh, she's in fight or flight mode, like she's you know trying to save and protect this kid, but you just don't think that she is the serial killer until that very last part. And I do love it. And you brought this up very briefly before, Stephanie, the doctor who's the kid's father. The doctor has appeared in other segments in this film because he was in the Unprotected segment and also the Till Death segment. And and it's the same actor, so I love that all these segments are basically centered around this one guy. I don't know if I'm trying to remember if maybe he might have been the voice of the guy who talks to to Emma at the start of the first segment through the door, but I don't know if it's the same character or not, so I'm not exactly sure. But I love that there's this one character, even though these are all separate anthology segments, there's just this one character who's kind of linked to most of them, which I thought was really clever.
Yeah, I was just going to interject before, because we can't talk all over each other. We like to give our guests their voices, but I like how the film, like, it does sort of take away a lot of the especially like horror film gender stereotypes, and I really, really liked that. I think that's why one of the reasons why I really liked this so much as well.
And I think what's interesting though about this film is this segment actually was shot 4 years before the film was even made.
Wow.
Because I don't know if I didn't do enough research to find out, but I believe Ryan Spindell had been wanting to make this film. So, and as a way to kind of get people interested in making it, he actually shot this segment first so he could, show it around to people to help get funding. And also the short itself went into a few festivals and even won a whole bunch of awards as well. So I think that's actually a great way because it's, again, even though this segment was shot 4 years before the rest of the film, it still tonally and visually is in sync with the rest of the film, which I think is even just as impressive because, you wouldn't think like, oh, maybe like in the years since the tones might be a bit different, but not visually, tonally, it fits very well with the rest of the film. And again, like you say, Marcy, I love how it ties back to the wraparound segment, which we're getting to right now, not the reach around, which of course has the great Clancy Brown as Montgomery Dark, the mortician at this mortuary. And he is spectacular. The makeup looks great, even though it does make him look like the tall man. Boy! I was going to say, I was waiting at some point for him just to yell at boy at some point. And now I want a remake with Clancy Brown, but that's beside the point. Anyways, and of course, as a wraparound overall, Stephanie, what did you think of the wraparound overall? Like from beginning right up until the great ending that this film ends on?
Yeah, fantastic. Just going out with a bang, passing the torch, but unwillingly. So you're basically setting the person on fire as you're passing it on to them. But yeah, she's the tooth fairy killer. So she takes her tooth from that poor dead child and basically said, like, hey, great time with the stories, buddy, but, I can't have you around letting people know where I am. And then we find out that he can't be picked off that easily, and so yeah, he takes care of her the way a mortician would. Yeah, it's just fantastic. I love the makeup she ends up with. She becomes the kind of mistress mortician storyteller in his stead after he gets a great goodbye scene. But I feel like you two are the keepers of Clancy Brown, so I won't go over that part. But yeah, just such a great ending because it's so creepy because she's there talking to a little boy and things aren't going to go well for him. But she's just kitted out. She looks wonderful. She got her own spooky garb, so she'll be a memorable kind of host herself. Yeah, it's got a little bit of wicked dark humor. It's definitely creepy. It's actually probably one of my favorite endings to a horror anthology I've ever seen.
And what about you, Marcy? What did you think of the overall wraparound segments of this film?
Yeah, actually, I really enjoyed them. Like, I mean, yes, it has Clancy Brown and he does such a great job. But I thought it was like really interesting, and you kind of wonder like, how will this all tie in? And boy, does it tie in when we get to the end. Like, I did not expect that whole ending and how she then like takes over what he's doing while he gets to ride off into the sunset, I guess. It's just, it really works. Like, you don't expect it and it just pulls it off really, really well. Yeah, I think the whole, like, all the wraparound, just, it flows really well. I think they all have like enough time between stories, so I think it actually is really, really damn effective. And I just think the whole, like, yeah, that ending just really works. Again, it just subverts those expectations and throws tropes on their heads. Like, damn, very clever, very well done. I've really liked it. I think it really brings everything together nicely.
I agree with both of you. I think one of the things, as much as I do love anthology horror films, sometimes for me the wraparound segment can be the weakest segment throughout the film. But for me, I think this one, and not just because of Clancy Brown just being fucking awesome as always, but I think the wraparound itself is definitely out there as one of the best wraparounds of any anthology film I've seen. I think from the beginning and all the little how it intertwines with the other stories is really well done. And both Clancy Brown and Kate LaCosta are both great in these segments, and I love their sort of back and forth between, especially with Sam/Charlotte is very sort of sassy towards Montgomery Dark. And he's like, throughout all during these scenes. And I love that even then we get kind of hints of who Montgomery Dark is, because at one point she sees like an old picture and we see a younger version of him, but it's like an older picture from, say, the early 1900s or even the 1800s. So there's little hints and pieces like of his background throughout this whole segment. But for me, the icing on the cake is, of course, the ending, which she thinks she's getting away scot-free. She tries to murder him and realizes that he's full of embalming fluid, which again ties us back to Tales from the Crypt. And then, of course, the even more icing of the cake and the chef's kiss is, oh, you think you could get... He's like, and I'm paraphrasing, basically like, oh, you could get away with this. This place is stories of all the people you've run into. And all the dead kids rise out from the books that she has killed over the years and seek their final revenge on her. And also, like, it's creepy skeleton kid puppets as well.
Yeah, that was a great scene.
Poetic justice, once again.
And of course, they get their teeth back as well, because one of them puts their teeth back into their mouth. So.
Finally, I can rest.
It's a nice touch as well,
yes.
I think.
Yeah, and having like her now take over as the mortician by killing her, and then he's set free, and then he just bursts in the dust as soon as he steps outside.
Like I said, he rides off into the sunset.
Literally. But yeah, I think overall it's a great wraparound segment, and the ending itself is just the perfect way to end this ride of a film on. But yeah, I guess that could be a wrap on the Mortuary collection. Stephanie, what are your final thoughts and rating for the overall film?
Yeah, again, thank you both for having me over so I could see this movie again and give it its redemption that it so deserved for me. And even listening to you both talk about it, I'm like, oh yeah. So I'm going to give it a very solid 4 out of 5. It's hard. Anthologies are usually a mixed bag. You're very rarely just going to get 5s all across the board. That's part of the fun, though. I I'm a sucker for like mystery boxes and things like that. I think it's part of the fun. But overall, this is very ambitious. And I think it pulled it off most of the time. It's a lot of fun. It's genuinely very creepy in parts. It has a good sense of humor. Like you said, it looks great. The wardrobe department, I hope they won some awards. Even like shockingly good fight choreography is in this. It's just full of surprises. That's wonderful. And I hope it inspires young filmmakers to keep making anthologies.
And what about yourself, Marcy? What are your final thoughts and rating for this film?
Yeah, wonderfully said, Steph. I hope this does actually inspire people as well, because horror anthology is just great. It's one of my favorite things in the entire world. But yeah, like the Mortuary Collection, I just think it's fantastic. I think it's such a strong film. For me at least, there's not a lot or anything that I can really say that I dislike or didn't work for me. I just think like overall, as an overall piece, like it's so effective. It really works. I think the cast are fantastic. And I like how it really amps things up. It throws tropes on their head. It has, some interesting like feminist messages in there. It's just a really wonderful film. And if you have yet to see the Mortuary Collection, listeners, please check it out. It is very easy to find. It is very worth your time. And yeah, I give this 4.5 exploding penises out of 5. I liked it that damn much, people.
I love your rating systems.
Well, thank you.
I give this film about 4 out of 5 as well, like the same as Steph. And I just think I've been watching a lot of anthology films. There's been some great and some fun anthology films over the last couple of years. But I think the Mortuary Collection for me is definitely probably one of the best ones I've seen in recent years. Because I feel like like I said at the beginning, it's one of those rare kind of anthology films that starts off being pretty solid, but as it goes on, it just gets better and better and better and better. Like all the segments deal with some really interesting themes. It also takes the time to subvert its the tropes of the horror genre, and just on a visual and filmmaking front, it is just so spectacular. Again, I don't know what the budget of this film was. I'm assuming it's very low budget, but this film looks like it's spectacular. I said this and thought about this a million times, but I haven't brought it up yet, but I'm going to just say this. I think for me, what I love about this film is this is probably the closest we'll ever see like an anthology film that's directed by Tim Burton. That's why this film reminded me so much of Tim Burton at times. I don't know why. Maybe it's because of the visual look and style. I don't know. But that's what it just felt like to me watching this film. And I think all the casts are great. The segments are all pretty strong. Like I said, the Babysitter Murders is like next level in terms of as a segment. Mm-hmm. And Clancy Brown is just utterly fantastic. It really is his show, and he definitely was very deserving of winning the Fangoria Best Supporting Performance Award a couple years back. So he won that and very deserving of it, if I must say. And like you say, Marcy, it's this film is very easy to find out. It is available on Blu-ray in some parts of the world, but it is streaming everywhere on Shudder, everywhere. So because it is a Shudder.
Oh, good.
Original, so people can check it out after listening to this show. But maybe watch the film first, then listen to us, since we've spoiled everything so far.
Yeah, either that or a good excuse to rewatch it and dive back in. And same with Tales from the Crypt as well. If you hadn't seen it for a while or you haven't seen it, give both of these a shot because they're fantastic.
Actually, maybe even do it as a double feature, because now we're talking about both these films tonight. Surprisingly, there are a lot of similarities with each other as well. Like, not just the wraparounds, but even some of the segments, like All Through the House and the Babysitter Murders are kind of similar segments in a way. Or Embalming Fluid and Wish You Were Here as well. So
yeah, no, they absolutely work as like a really cool, like strong horror anthology double feature.
Oh, for sure. And I guess that could be a wrap on this episode of Podcasters of Horror.
Thank you. Not a reach?
Well, a reach around, I should say, of Podcasters of Horror. First of all, thank you, Marcy, for always being a great co-host, as per usual.
Welcome.
And thank you, Stephanie, for coming on the show and talking about these two movies with us.
Yeah, thank you so much. You're both wonderful hosts, and this was so much fun. It was great diving into these.
Well, you're more than welcome to come back anytime. So we have got other episodes in the future, so you're more than welcome to come back if you so fit.
Yes.
But I guess we'll... Marcy, where can people find us on the internet this week?
Yeah, just check us out at our base of operations at supermarcey.com. That is SUPERMARCEY.com. You could find Podcasters of Horror in all your podcast players. Just search Podcasters of Horror. Or you can search Super Marcy or Beej Mine. I'm sure they will show up there and you can subscribe. You can leave us a rating or a review. Let us know what you think of the show. All that cool, snazzy stuff. And you can find me personally at Twitter on twitter.com/supermarcy. And you can follow me on the Letterboxd at super_Marcy.
Awesome. And Stephanie, where can people find you on the internet this week?
I'm on Twitter as Scrawfish. And yeah, that's
Awesome. But people can find you because you're also doing Junesploitation as well.
yes, having a lot of fun with that.
Yeah, all three of us are doing it, so follow us all on Twitter and Letterboxd to read all of our thoughts on Junesploitation, or even just follow the hashtag Junesploitation. People want to find me personally, they can find me on my Twitter page at twitter.com/BeejMine, or my Letterboxd account at letterboxd.com/BeejMine, or you can find all my work over at supermarcy.com with all my reviews and columns. So yeah, that is the end of this latest episode of Podcasters of Horror. We hope all of our listeners enjoyed it, and stay tuned for next month, in which we will be diving into season 2 of Channel Zero with No End House. And we'll see you all then, everyone. See you, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye. The Super Network is proudly sponsored by Surfshark VPN. Why would you have a VPN in this day and age? Well, a lot of people are quite concerned about tracking and their online privacy, and using a VPN ensures that you are safe and secure online. Surfshark VPN provides a lot of extra added layers of security, as well as ad blocker and a kill switch if your information is ever compromised. A great bonus feature with having Surfshark is something is not available on your streaming service in your country. You just pop on that Surfshark VPN and you can probably find so much more streaming in different countries. If you want to find something like Masters of Horror, it is available on Tubi, so just select the correct country and you'll be able to watch such a great and fantastic show. Surfshark VPN is one of the most reliable and cheapest of the VPNs out there, with up to 81% off offer when you subscribe for 24 months. Please use the link surfshark.deals/supernetwork to take advantage of this amazing deal. You can also find the link in the show notes. Thank you, Surfshark. Surfy shark do 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 do. Surfy shark do 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 do. And now back to the show.